Live for the moments that make you happy. I went to Crunchyroll Expo. Again. This time, it was planned and I stayed longer. My goal is to share my experience being an attendee and compare it with last year's whenever possible. There will be a link to last year's blog and a card should pop up advising of that as well. While I did other stuff, rest assured, this video focuses on the expo almost in its entirety. My experience during last year's Crunchyroll Expo was magnificent. It was the first time I flew to California and the first time I flew in over a decade of not doing so. I will go on to fly one more time on a personal journey to Ohio to meet up with a friend. For that trip, I could procure the funds easily due to my bonus getting paid around Christmas time and having some decent savings in my vacation fund. Not having to pay for lodging either was a boon, as I would go to crash at his house. Traveling sure is an addicting experience. With that aside, the fact lingered that I wasn't able to settle the debt I incurred on last year's trip, and my finance management was at an all-time low. Having just taken out a car from the dealership, it didn't leave me with a lot of money to work with. I had enough to get by, but not enough to seriously save like before. I'd look at my statements with dread. Dread thinking I wouldn't be able to make it this year, when this is something I wanted, and I wanted badly. Just when I was about to give up, a ray of light, I was able to procure the funds to make the trip. I don't feel comfortable discussing the circumstances behind it all, but, like a friend told me, I had to look at the silver lining. Figuring out the logistics would be a challenge. The expo was going to be held on Labor Day weekend, September 1st to the 3rd. A good idea, considering that the attendance on August 25th last year, a Friday, wasn't the best. Crunchyroll managed to move the event from the smaller Santa Clara venue to the much bigger San Jose McEnery Convention Center, home to the Fanime convention during the summer for almost 15 years. I knew I wanted to stay longer, but how much longer? Since I missed day 3 last year, I didn't want to repeat the same mistake. Eventually, I settled on doing a week and a half of vacation, which would not only cover the entirety of the expo, but also some ancillary time to know California. First was the hotel. I knew they wouldn't charge me for the reservation until check-in. I must have changed arrival and departure dates like 3 times before I settled. I did want to stay someplace close to the expo, since last year's walks totally busted my feet. The center has 2 hotels right next to it, the Marriott and the Hilton. When I looked for available days, the former wouldn't have all the days I needed and the latter was completely unavailable. There's one hotel a block over that would become my home while I was there, the Westin San Jose. Previously known as the St. Clair, this building is a piece of history, being open for business since 1926, and its heritage officially recognized by the government with its inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places. Having settled that, the Compass will be next. I can't recall if this was a thing last year, but Crunchyroll introduced a discounted source based on how early you bought the pass. For every segment of days that pass, all tickets increased $10 in price. Given the underwhelming offering of last year's VIP Plus pass, I gave serious thought on downgrading, but ultimately decided against it. Finally, the plane tickets. Since this is the one thing I get charged on the spot, I needed to be absolutely sure about my schedule. My employer's perks website advises something called a premium economy category, with Delta the only airline to offer it. They call it Comfort Plus, a segment of seats on their planes in which more legroom is added. Since American didn't have this feature, and business and first class tickets were way outside my price range, this seemed like a happy medium. I would fly with Delta, with layovers in Atlanta and Salt Lake City before getting to San Jose. 2 things of note before we continue. Given my experience with inclement weather last year, we got struck by Hurricane Maria after all, I would ensure everything I could. The pass and the tickets were protected should something happen that I couldn't be out there. The fight for the vacation days was grueling. My employer didn't want to approve all the days I needed, and after a constant back and forth between the operations manager and my direct manager, I obtained all but 2 days I needed. I'm not sure how the company expects me to be in the office on days that I'll be out of country, but I'll do what I need to do, even if it is to my detriment. Thursday. I left earlier this time. My flight had me departing at 7:30 a.m. After literally having breakfast at the airport, the 12-hour journey began. One funny incident happened in Atlanta. While I was grabbing food, one of the fellows queuing, a slightly older couple, asked if my shirt was from Fairy Tail. I was wearing a white Full Metal Alchemist shirt under a jacket I had on. I was flabbergasted. I didn't know what to say, mostly because I didn't expect to be approached. My brain went with, I never wear a Fairy Tail shirt, sorry, then proceeded to unzip my jacket to show the full design. To be honest, I was more in the mood to cut the conversation loose before it became awkwarder than what it already was. I got to San Jose, grabbed my bag, asked for an Uber, and got to the hotel. And this is where my woes would begin. During check-in, the car I used to make the reservation kept declining. Pretty sure I had enough credit to cover my stay, until I was advised by front desk that they were attempting to charge a 30% deposit for miscellaneous expenses on top of the room fees. While the attendant reassured me that this was a refundable fee if I didn't use any hotel services, I was not ready for that at all. The mad dash to find a solution began. I didn't want to be finding a hotel when I came from so far on my very first day. I called Chase to see if they're willing to up my credit limit. Declined. Front desk wanted everything on a single card if I was to stay there, which is not something I could get done today. And even if I could make a payment towards the card, the processing time ensured that those funds won't be available right away. It wasn't the ideal solution, but I thought of the cash I had, 3/4 of the bill on the card and the remaining on cash. He had to escalate with his manager. They were understanding of my situation, especially since they witnessed my call with Chase, agreeing to an exception. While I have a room, I'm 1/4 short of the spending money I brought. Keep in mind, I'm staying longer, so not only I can't spend like crazy at Crunchyroll Expo, but souvenir purchases go right off the window. When I go up to the room to unpack, I noticed there was something missing, the iPad I was using at the plane. I'm dead certain I didn't leave it at the Uber. The people at the front desk didn't observe an iPad among my belongings, and I recalled not having it with me when I picked up my suitcase. I tried to get in touch with Delta to report the lost item, but by the time I noticed, it was 6 p.m. Their lost and found department was closed. I filled the online application, hopeful that a flight attendant found it, or a good Samaritan turned it in. While my data is safe, it being a Touch ID iPad and all, the anxiety over not having it was real. Luckily, a friend was there to take my worry away, even if for a little bit. Friday, a sleepless night. I'm dealing with a missing iPad and there's no one at Delta that I can speak to in regards to an update, but I was also excited for the kickoff party later. After breakfast, I walked around the city, saw the Cathedral Basilica of St. Joseph, passed by the San Jose State University, and dropped by the nearest 7-Eleven to grab some water. One thing I noticed, a majority of people, both young and old, had Apple Watches on. This is Silicon Valley, I guess. First stop was the Winchester Mystery House. To give you the Cliff's Note version, if you're going, be sure to buy tickets for both trips they offer, and, if possible, go during Halloween. I found that the mystery aspect particularly fit that holiday. Honestly, I didn't care much for the mystery aspect, but the historian one was fascinating. Once I returned, a Japantown trip was next, about 10 blocks north from where I was staying, and I could either take the light rail or get there on bike. I was eager to try out the latter after reading quite a bit about bike share programs. I called my friend to accompany me on this trip, his reaction at biking there a highlight. While my original plan was to walk around Japantown after eating, my friend needed to do a shopping run. We went to the Best Buy in Santana Row, a high-end shopping district in West San Jose, close to the Winchester Mystery House. I didn't need anything, but I bought a small tripod. Thought I could use it. Upon return, we went back to our rooms. I took a shower and crashed on the bed. When I woke up, it was 9:30. The kickoff party started at 8 and my friend messaged to ask if I was around. I hastily put some clothes on, leaving everything but the phone, room key and badge, and ran out to the event. I had to go back and fetch my wallet after I got there. They were selling alcohol and I wanted a drink. At the event, I ran across Tristan Arcata Gallant and Nate Mingam, introduced myself to Geoff Thiel of Mother Basement's fame, Miles Thomas from Crunchyroll, and Gigguk from, well, Gigguk. Calling him by his given name, Garnt, just doesn't feel right. Saturday. I was checking different breakfast places around town, and today, I visited the one place that has good coffee. It's a small Italian cafe on South 1st Street called Cafe Frascati. I wholly recommend them if you're in the area and are a coffee snob like me. The first thing I did as soon as I got to the expo was collect the goodies over at the fulfillment center. When I got there, I was welcomed by not one, not two, but 3 lines in order to get all the stuff. VIP bag, the pre-order shirt and lanyard, and the lapel pins for early reservation. For a moment, I thought I arrived late to the next event, and that the 3-line queue was a bad idea. But it made a lot of sense. The crew were getting by people fast, making the uneasiness more palpable. Between all the queues, I was out in about 45 minutes, give or take. After leaving the bag at the hotel, I walked to a nearby shop called Forger on South 1st Street for the Hime Cafe event. The queue got to around the theater at the corner. There were around 30 people, myself included, waiting for the 11:30 slot. Once inside, a group of mates greeted us and one was assigned to walk us to our seats. There was food for purchase, but I chose not to buy anything. I had breakfast late today and I thought I'd be fine. Quite frankly, I wanted to buy food later, but by the time I was going to do so, it was already time for the next group to come in. I grabbed an orange juice from the bar for my free drink and we had everybody introduce themselves at the mate's request. Some were shyer than others, and there was the odd person who didn't want to engage in the shenanigans. To which I'd ask, why did you come then? You can't have food anywhere else. One of the things we did was play Jenga with the one half of the table that went along. The mate suggested a punishment. There were several Team Rem members, myself included, and the one who toppled the tower would have to yell, "I love Emilia." To up the stakes of the punishment, I mentioned that I was working on a blog and the person who lost would be filmed. This wasn't regular Jenga. These pieces were very small and unfriendly to someone with fat fingers. It'd be common for me to use my pinky to remove pieces, celebrating every successful piece removal with a hearty, "Not today." After half an hour of playing, and the tower looking ever more fragile, someone bumped the table while accommodating, but didn't want to assume responsibility. The young lady whose turn was next took the fall, even if it wasn't her fault, and said the magic words.
I love Amelia!
This must have been particularly embarrassing, but hey, that's the punishment, and I didn't make the rules. Upon return, I went to a place called Okamoto's Kitchen at the exhibit hall. They call themselves a group of cooks that adapt traditional Japanese foods to American cuisine. I noticed there was a long queue to get food, but what would come I didn't expect. The downright lethargic pace they were putting out orders. And the queue did not get any smaller. I will go on a Twitter tirade, posting no fewer than 10 tweets complaining about the long queue and how it's making me miss panels I really wanted to attend. The queue would make me miss a CRX chat with Reina's colleague, and an LGBTQ panel I wanted to attend, which was a bummer. To top it all off, there were reports across the line that they were running out of stock. You have got to be kidding me. After 1.5 hours at the queue, plus an additional half hour to get the food, I sat down to eat. If that wasn't enough, I got charged $25 for both the food and the drink. Just what was I paying for here? Since I was not giving a receipt, I didn't know the breakdown, but I definitely avoid this place. After eating, I made a beeline to the lower floor CRX chat stage to catch Alcatraz's conversation with the host on how it is to be a YouTuber.
I go because I want to spend time with friends, and I have a lot of friends over the internet, and we don't all live in the same city. So going to a con that is like somewhat equidistant for all of us makes a lot of sense, and then we can meet up, we can experience the con together, we can have a good time, and then we can do that. And then if anybody asks, well, what are you doing? We're just like, oh, well, we're all going to this event. Rather than, yeah, we're just hanging out at one of our friends' basement for a weekend. That doesn't have the same kind of ring to it.
Right.
But I think a lot of people go to cons because they like to be able to both celebrate and show off their passion.
Yeah.
So when you have big conventions, you're able to say, not necessarily just to you or your group of friends or other people with your similar interests, but you're able to show to other people who aren't into anime specifically, hey, there are a lot of people like me, please notice us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hung out with my friend and his companions, since we were going to the same place. Seizing opportunity to update my picture with Arcada. The camera is better, but the pose was the same. He explained he didn't like to smile for pictures ever since he was a kid, when I mentioned that we look like bodyguards. The next panel would be a deep dive on Crunchyroll's mascot, Crunchyroll Hime, hosted by Victoria Holding and Tiffany Sheng of the brand management team, and Nashira Shuster and Kara, main mascot artist and For Coma creator. A lot of details were shared about how she came to be, including the signed documents that never saw the light of day before. Understandably, we were asked not to film the panel. The amount of thought put behind Hime is staggering. Among the many anecdotes shared, there was one that was the genesis of conversations toward the Hime 17 statue that Kotobukiya is producing for release later in the year. Victoria has teased social media relentlessly with Hime's name, and the story behind why that is came out. Hime was never supposed to have a name until Crunchyroll's work with Rooster Teeth. We were told Hime's real name, but we were sworn to secrecy, to the point in which the door was closed before sharing. After buying a majority of the Crunchyroll branded stuff I wanted, I started browsing the artist alley and the exhibit hall as much as I could. Had to hold off on purchases. Was feeling self-conscious that I didn't have much money and needed to assess what was my financial picture when I got back. I did browse the entirety of Artist Alley, but barely scratched the exhibit hall. I was about 1/3 in before the call for attendees to depart started. But apparently, people didn't want to leave. There was an improv cosplay party outside in which people were dancing to all sorts of songs played by one guy who had a boombox. It was fun to watch, and they were having a good time, which is great. With the experience of the previous day, which wasn't as pleasant as I thought, I headed off for day 2. First up, a panel that discussed the role of women in anime and manga. Hosted by Tiffany Sheng, this panel featured the Akira Himekawa duo representing manga, Atsuko Ishizuka representing anime, and Akiyo Nagano representing illustration and their respective interpreters. Concern for the guests' comfort, no pictures or film of the panel were permitted. Himekawa and Ishizuka-san agreed that their fields don't have many women creatives. We'd love to see that change. Nagano-san mentioned that it was the opposite in her field. It almost feels like she was brought in as a counterweight. The whole process of question, interpreter, answer, interpreter was very unintuitive. There must be a better solution to avoid these gaps of silence. And while the ideal solution is for the guests to speak English, that may not be feasible. I'd suggest that Crunchyroll supply the interpreters in hopes of making this faster? Who knows? A few more questions may have fitted in if only the process was faster. There was a cute segment nearing the end of the panel. Ishizuka-san's birthday was coming up, and Tiffany asked us all to sing happy birthday, which made her very happy. Next up, a panel in which a group of Western women animators sat down and discussed the current state of women in animation. Moderated by Margaret Dean of the Women in Animation non-profit organization, Domi Shi of Pixar, Sophia Alexander and Amaria Labari of Elation Studios, responsible for High Guardian Spice. Considering that a majority of the staff has suffered harassment after the latter's announcement, they've asked us to not film the panel. This felt like a conversation between four friends who haven't seen each other in quite some time, and despite several interruptions from filming attendees, it was enjoyable to see. By this time, I must have browsed Artist Alley like 3 times. I needed to make a decision. Geoff's autograph session was in a few hours, and I didn't want a default poster. I recall watching his Yu-Gi-Oh video some time ago, and I wanted an autograph that was meaningful. I started browsing the area, looking for a Yu-Gi-Oh themed print. There was one I saw earlier of the Dark Magician duo, but by the time I came back, it was already sold out. A few rows over, there was a booth with some more Yu-Gi-Oh art, aptly named Kaiba Corp Art Department, that would have the one piece I wanted signed. The look in his eyes handing him the print is a dear memory. I also got a chuckle out of him when I mentioned, "I'm not making you sign the joke print, that's for Gigguk." After reviewing my schedule, I noticed that Nate had a chat going on, so I ran to the CRX chat stage hoping to pick him up before it was done. And pick up I did.
Was when I first started working, when I first started writing, so I started writing for Crunchyroll in 2010. And then I started working in the office in the customer support team in 2014. Now, there's that moment where you're like, okay, I will 100% dive in, devote myself to watching every show of the season. Don't do this. I lived and breathed it, but I also realized I didn't want to get sick of it. So I had to kind of pull back and balance it myself. Now, anime is one of those things where I don't necessarily get tired of it unless I do it to myself.
Right.
So I am perfectly fine, following shows. Like right now I'm following 4 shows, and I do follow a lot of manga. I read Weekly Shonen Jump, the Viz release.
Right.
I keep up on that stuff, but I also compartmentalize. It's like, well, right now is anime time, and then I'm going to go focus on this other interest I have. So you need to space it out, and you need to do that much more so when your life revolves, your professional life revolves around, your personal interests.
As a central theme, it was about how one can work in the anime industry. Considering Nate's background, how he landed a job there is nothing short of amazing. And he's a man with quite a few stories to tell too. Next, the Gigguk Q&A panel.
So I was just in my underwear watching Bakemonogatari. And of course it had to be the Senjukahara shower scene, if any of you are familiar with that. So it was around that scene. And then I just hear the door creak open. And I'm just like, please, to God, let that be the wind. And I turn around, and one of my roommates had come home early. And what he sees is a guy sitting in his underwear, watching some anime girl shower on my computer screen. And he looks at me, and I look at him, and time just kind of stops, because I'm just like, is there any way I can explain myself out of this? Like, what can I say? And before I can think of anything, he just slowly...
He didn't have any particular thing in mind, just people asking questions about his opinion on different matters on anime. He mentioned that Naruto is the worst Monogatari girl. My respect for this man may have increased tenfold. A more personal panel will follow, headed by Nate, on positive masculinity depictions in anime.
Now, this is going to be kind of a big one. Traditional masculine qualities and roles all come from one thing, and that is strength. You will notice that a lot of these qualities, as they come up, are either a demonstration of strength or an aversion to weakness. And that's kind of a major thing going with traditional masculine qualities, is that there is I'm waiting for it to come up. You're seeing all these very positive qualities. There it is right there. It's an avoidance of femininity because there are the traditional qualities point to, oh, well, a man has to be different from a woman. The man is the strong side, the woman is the weak side. And if any woman who has given birth in here can talk, thank you for raising your hand back there, ma'am. I don't think we could handle that. That's some hardcore shit right there.
Generally, masculinity is discussed as being toxic, and in many ways it is. But this panel is the sort of reminder that it has its positive aspects to it. I love his acknowledgement that this is a discussion, and he was welcome on being wrong on his points. A very mature thing to do and something I deeply appreciate. This panel should be a thing that comes back every year, if only for the fact that this is an open, honest discussion between adults. And those with adult mindsets as well. After grabbing a bite to eat from the concession center, it's Jeopardy time! This time, Victoria defends her crown. It was smart to assign a bigger place to do this, since not a soul could fit in the room last year. The queue to enter circled the place. While I got there early, I had to wait until at least 75 people in front of me entered. I was lucky to get a front row seat among all that. As far as tech difficulties go, they were pretty contained. Miles didn't have to switch laptops in the middle of the game, but, embarrassingly enough, the Jeopardy software he was using only worked when he had it on full screen. Overall, I'd say he came ready. As for the new players, we had Siobhan Sullivan of the Crunchyroll social media team and Leland Manigo of RDC World War. Yes, I recorded it all. No, I'm not going to show it all. So here's a few of the highlights.
I'm double checking my answer on the Crunchyroll app, now available on the App Store. J.J. Abrams is working to adapt this 2016 anime film that broke all records for the medium in Japan. Project Dakota.
Your name?
Excuse me, what is the format of Jeopardy?
Oh, what is your name? Sorry.
No matter how cool and aloof they may be, it's possible. Project Dakota.
What is Kude?
That is correct. 500 points. Let me tell you one thing. As the host, the infallible host of this program, if any of them had seen Gurren Lagann or Steins Gate, I'd be embarrassed right now, but I'm not. I put tears in the
Miles,
description.
you take these questions off shit you just watched.
For that one, yeah.
I try to stay off the internet as much as possible.
Yeah, but did you 10 years ago?
Yeah, I didn't have a computer.
11-year-old name.
11?
Oh, shit. What if I'm wrong? Can I lose more points?
Yeah, you can lose more points.
Hey,
Sailor B.
what is Die Buster?
That is incorrect.
Shit.
Let's do, what's the middle one?
PA Works.
Oh yeah, I'm not touching that.
But we were like listening to like hardcore bands.
And I was looking at nice boats.
I'm sure you were.
The answer we were looking for is, what's this?
Wait. Like from...
You're asking me to deconstruct a meme for you here on Anime Japan.
I'm tired, Miles. Hello? Oh.
Well, don't turn it off if you don't want it to not work.
I know.
At the end, it wasn't even a contest. Victoria won. Siobhan was close at times, but not close enough. Monday would mostly be spent in autograph lanes. I had a signing session with Yuichi Fukushima, Atsushi Nishigori, and Masayoshi Tanaka, producer, director, and character designer behind Darling in the FranXX, respectively. Reina Scully and Gigguk. Since this is the highlight of the day, I'll run through these before covering the one panel I went to. First, the FranXX staff. Honestly, I chose them as my last signing because I didn't know of anyone else I like autographs from. And FranXX is the one other thing I'm familiar with from the guests' body of work. It also gave me an excuse to start the show. I avoid trigger stuff after Kill la Kill demonstrating they're not a studio for me. This belief would go on to be challenged by me adoring Kiss Naiver, and willfully contributing to the Patreon campaign, but that's neither here nor there. I went with some 02 prints I would have liked to have signed, but was promptly informed by the staff that no custom prints will be signed. Only the official print made for Crunchyroll Expo or an autograph board will be allowed. Oh, and no pictures either. We were asked to put our names in a post-it note as the staff would like to customize the signatures. Now, these gentlemen do not speak English, so my interaction with them wouldn't be as meaningful as, say, some of the attendees that knew Japanese and were able to speak to them. Always nice to see, albeit I felt a little lonely. Should probably learn the language. After FranXX, Reina. While I'm not as familiar with her work as a close friend is, I do know her, not only as a host, but as producer of Anime Academy, to which I didn't shy away from saying I loved. Originally the signing session was at 2:15, but due to scheduling conflicts, they had to accommodate me in an earlier one, 11:45 to be specific. Her enthusiasm is contagious. She welcomed me with praise over my shirt, and my Hero Academia white shirt I own with some of the main cast in school outfits, and had a small combo around Anime Academy and a podcast she did that I was getting into, the Boys Only Club podcast. I wanted a picture, but she wanted a selfie. I am not good with selfies at all. I gave her my phone and I got out knowing how to take good selfies. At least, I hope so. The last of the autograph sessions would be with Gigguk. I spoke briefly with him at the kickoff party and was in the front row of his QA panel. Couldn't help but feeling like I was following him at this point. My turn came up. I told him that I fully intended for him to sign a joke print. I was looking for an Ero Manga Sensei print during my Artist Alley runs, but no artist had that on display. So I went with a Kana print from Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. That is, until I heard in the QA that he had an affinity for 02. I also took the opportunity to share with him something that bothered me in his QA, that I needed a clearer answer. Someone asked if he could share his opinion on High Guardian Spice and tell everyone how much it sucked. He didn't entertain the premise, saying that he can't give opinions on stuff he hasn't seen. Not only was this a blatant "agree with me, Gigguk" moment of that attendee, but the lack of commitment rubbed me the wrong way. I asked if he really didn't have thoughts on the matter, or if he did, but would rather not share them. He told me he'd wait until the final product. As a rule, he doesn't engage in media politics and would rather evaluate the thing on its merits, but agrees the way the show was announced could have been better. Which I don't agree with, but anyway. Before I left, after asking about such a heavy topic, I'd mentioned that he made me laugh, but then I saw the "You'll grow out anime" video. My respect for this man grew. Not in a joking matter like Worst Monogatari, but real respect.
Except we didn't. We never grew out of it. We're growing up with it.
For my final panel, one that I watched on video last year, Nate's Action as Storytelling panel.
Rock Lee's job is to always fight the strongest character in a story arc and contextualize the threat to the main characters. Because Rock Lee, who never wins, by the way, Rock Lee never legitimately wins. Okay, I will pause the show specifically to explain why that doesn't exactly work for about half a Dragon Ball. So, this was Yamcha's job before. Yamcha's job, no, that's fine. I would like to talk more about action. So Yamcha's job, originally, when Yamcha showed up, the first thing he did was knock Goku the hell out. That was the first thing he did. He showed off a new move, he showed off Wolfang Fist, knocked Goku out. Yamcha was a threat in the beginning. And because Dragon Ball went on like a crazy tangent of power scaling, he did get left behind. However, for about half the series, Yamcha's job, especially in tournaments, was to fight the person that Goku would fight in the finals. So him fighting this person would, usually Yamcha would show off a new skill, he would show off, oh, I've built up my basics. And he'd take somebody out in the first round, then in the second or third round, he fights somebody who is well above his level. He fights Jackie Chun, who is Master Roshi. He fights Tenshinhan, who snaps his leg like a crispy breadstick. Yamcha was a badass. He was. He did a pretty good job. So him dying immediately at the start of the Saiyan arc was a big deal. You got to look at Dragon Ball as a whole picture, all the way from Pilaf to Boo. And for about like a little more than half of that series, Yamcha does his job. Then Toriyama forgets he exists. And then we have all of this right here. But yes, for real, watch or read Dragon Ball. It's outstanding, and give Yamcha more credit.
It followed the same format as last year's with updated graphics to document the hottest shows of the season. It was a solid panel. Nate developed a particular expertise, him being a fan of action movies, that would make him the best candidate for this topic. The safety net panel, in a way. A still love for the positive masculinity one to return. And that's a wrap for Crunchyroll Expo. Spent the last hour filming around the premises and browsing the exhibit hall to get one last look. Albeit, I wouldn't be able to buy anything, as my funds were running short. I still had a few days left in California. Particular highlights was a trip to Alcatraz and Angel Island. A piece of advice: don't try to tackle both islands in one day. Alcatraz may be small, but there's quite a bit to see outside the Cell House trip. And Angel Island being bigger, that goes without saying, with camping trips, biking, and several landmarks one could stop in. That pretty much sums up my trip to California. I was feeling homesick the day before going back, so while I achieved my objective of staying throughout all the Crunchyroll Expo, I stayed too long. But hey, hindsight 2020. I'll definitely stay less time in the future. And as I sign off, a final view of the center that housed Crunchyroll Expo and the place that will house Crunchyroll Expo next year on Labor Day weekend. Looking forward to seeing this place painted weep again. Thank you for watching. Until next time, with nothing more to say, signing out.